Hi, my name's Neil. Welcome to my video about me trying to learn 50/50 grinds on vert ramps. So thanks for joining me. You obviously either have an interest in learning 50/50 grinds on a vert ramp, or at least an interest in seeing me trying to learn them. I'm going to try and explain some backstory and all the kind of feelings and efforts that go towards me trying to learn to do 50/50s on vert. It's a really weird thing, and I think I'll start with the comparisons to like mini ramps and smaller things. Now, I've been doing 50/50 grinds on mini ramps for absolutely years, and a bit of backstory to me is that I've been skating now for I think just over 4 years after taking a kind of 25-year break. I used to skate back, I think from the age of about 7 years old up to maybe about 15 or 16 years old. That was probably around like 1994, 95, 96 kind of time. And then I stopped for about 25 years and then started again 4.5 years ago maybe. And back in my kind of early teens, I learned how to 50/50 grind on mini ramps. And pretty much mini ramps was all I ever used to skate. I never really skated any bowls, certainly didn't skate any vert ramps, or at least I went on a vert ramp and sort of pumped up to the height of a mini ramp, but I didn't skate vert. And everything else really for me was street skating back then. But my first love really was mini ramps, and so that's what I did best. So naturally, when I started skating again a few years ago, mini ramps are what I gravitated towards, but I was also fascinated by bowls because there are a lot more around now than there ever were back when I was younger. And the only ones that I kind of came into contact with were really gnarly, crusty concrete that just didn't look in the slightest bit attractive to me. So yeah, I started skating bowls as well not that long ago. Now, as well as skating bowls, a lot of my friends that I got to know through learning to skate again were skating vert ramps. It seemed to me up until that time another world, something that I would never be doing. It's crazy scary, very high. I'm afraid of heights. I'm never going to do that sort of thing until I kind of started to get into the idea of it and I started skating vert. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I've been getting to grips with that. And if you haven't been following my channel, there's plenty of videos back previously if you want to look back through my history of videos where you can get an idea of where I started and what was going on. So I've probably been skating vert maybe 2.5 years, I guess. I'm thinking maybe a bit more than that, about 2.5 years, I think though. And that pretty much consisted of learning to drop in and then doing lots of kick turns and getting used to being up on the vert wall. When you're in a mini ramp, you've got kind of a very gradual transition. You always kind of feel like gravity is on your side. But once you start to go up to vert, you've got gravity to fight against now. And that's a very weird thing because you're going up, but you've got to stay fast enough to go up the wall and stay against the wall. If you don't go very fast, you just feel kind of weightless and, you know, it all goes wrong. So, yeah, there's that kind of aspect of having to go a lot faster and dealing with gravity that I never really comprehended before until I started skating vert. I kind of got a slight feeling of it with big bowls. When you get towards vert on bowls, you can feel that you need to go faster to stick against the wall. Otherwise, again, you start to feel weightless. So that notion was there in my mind, but skating a vert ramp really solidified that. And any of you that have tried skating a vert ramp will very quickly feel that as you go up the wall, you start to get weightless and you start to feel like you're just going to fall and float down to the bottom. Or not float, but fall down to the bottom. So anyway, it brought an entirely different feeling. And what I want to do with these kind of videos, and I've done a video before about what nobody ever tells you about skating vert. So if you're interested in that, go and take a look. I'll leave a link somewhere, you know, where in the comments or a card up here. Yeah, I very quickly became conscious of these alternate feelings I'd not felt before, and I'd like to try and get those across in these videos. I realized that it may not be the same for everybody because our minds work differently, but I just want to get across what my mind was doing and what it is doing and how it felt for me, just in case it is remotely interesting or useful to anybody else. So anyway, back to the original subject of 50/50 grinds. I've been doing 50/50 grinds for ages, as I said, on mini ramps, and I find them really easy. Is actually my favorite trick. And progressing from mini ramps into bowls, I started to really enjoy doing them in bowls and doing them on concrete pool coping. It's just unmeasurably amazing. The feeling, the sound, everything. So that just really solidified that it was pretty much my favorite trick. So I got super comfortable doing them on smaller stuff, and I thought that must surely be the first or one of the first tricks that I try to do on a vert ramp, because I'm so comfortable doing them on smaller stuff. And I had this notion in my head for quite a long time, and I did a video over a year ago, and I'll find it and link it here as well, of trying to prepare to do 50-50 grinds or axle stalls on steeper stuff. That feeling is still very fresh in my mind, and what I was talking about there still applies. So again, it's worth watching if you're trying to get past the mental barrier of doing those kind of tricks on bigger, steeper stuff. Really, the bottom line is that everything, doesn't matter what size of ramp you progress to, if you start on like a 4.5 foot mini ramp, or even smaller, a 2 foot mini ramp, and you start to get some tricks on there, when you take them up to the next level, so from a 2 foot to a 4 foot, or a 4 foot to a 6 foot, or a 6 foot to an 8 foot and beyond, every stage to me feels like I'm learning the trick all over again, because everything is different. The approach and the way that you go into it, gravity, the steepness, how your body is leaning. You know, if you're on a very mellow ramp, your body's leaning like at that kind of angle. If you're on a very steep ramp, your body is now leaning at that kind of angle. And on vert, you're pretty much horizontal. So all those levels, it kind of changes the way that you feel. And for a 50-50 grind, the nature of the name being 50-50, it means half in and half out. So you need to be kind of leaning at a 45-degree angle when you're actually doing the grind. And so getting up from, perhaps you're already 45 degrees on a mini ramp, so just staying leaning in at that angle as you do the grind is pretty straightforward. But as you get steeper and steeper, you've got to pick your body up and be a bit more upright in order to maintain the correct angle to lock in and do the grind. So there's a bit of a strange mental barrier of standing yourself up. And even when you first learn to 50-50 grind on a mini ramp, you might be right inside the transition and you can't stand yourself up enough to stand up. And people call them stand-up grinds because you're kind of standing up. That gets worse and worse, or harder and harder, the bigger and steeper stuff you skate. And that really is the bottom line to learning pretty much every trick on bigger stuff. So anyway, I was thinking 50-50 grinds on a vert ramp, that's got to be my trick. That's got to be the first thing that I get to go. And so I started preparing to do them by doing slash grinds, backside slash grinds. I was doing a million of them over and over again. That's the only thing that I was doing on a vert ramp, dropping in over and over again. Now, to start with, actually, before the slash grinds came, I was just kick turning, backside kick turning. So drop in, backside kick turn over and over again. You can see some of my early vert videos from about a year or maybe 2 years ago now, of me just dropping in and backside kick turning, and the guys that I'm skating with are kind of yelling at me to pump harder, get faster, get up there and get my backside slashes in. And with their help, eventually I did, and so my backside kick turns just turned into lots of slash grinds. So over and over again, backside slash grinds. And I was previously quite afraid of backside slash grinds because when you turn, you can't really see your truck getting close to the coping or your wheels getting close to the coping, and so you have to do it all by feel. And what I began to do to start with was doing a backside kick turn, but my truck wasn't actually coming into contact with the coping because I was so lent in that actually I was doing what people call a wheeler or an edger, where my wheel was rolling over the coping but my truck wasn't slashing. And I'll try and explain that right now with the truck. Hang on. Right, so here's my little prop, my truck. I'll try and say my hand is the coping. As I was sort of riding up the surface, what would normally be a grind if I was going like this, if my hand is the coping, as I was riding up the surface, my wheel was staying on the surface because it wasn't tilting over enough. It was kind of being vertical, and I was just kick turning back over and it wasn't grinding. And so I had to be very conscious to put some more weight down on my heel to push the truck onto a grind. So if I was rolling up and going like that and missing, there was no grind noise, and I was wondering why it was not making a grind noise, because it felt like I was grinding but I wasn't. I just had to put an extra bit of weight on my heel to tilt my board over enough to grind. And sometimes it got a bit scary because I was going like this. You know, I was almost out the top. Really, that was something that nobody ever told me until I realized that I needed to put some more weight on my heel. And so if you're doing backside kick turns, learning to backside slash grind, always make sure that there's a bit of pressure on your heel as you do the backside turn so that the truck actually comes into contact with the coping and you get that grind. Otherwise you might overshoot like I was doing. Luckily I didn't ever kind of go into backside disaster, but it could probably happen if I pushed it a bit too hard. So that's one takeaway point, was making sure that there's enough weight on the heel to get a grind. So then I was backside slash grinding all the time. That was kind of all I could do. And I began to try and start standing them up a bit, because I thought if I need to get into a 50-50, I need to stand up. Being horizontal in the ramp, you know, fully horizontal as the board comes over, you know, I'm standing out that way. Being fully horizontal, I need to stand up to get a 50-50. So I started to try and stand up those backside slash grinds. And by doing that, I was kind of getting towards backside 5-0. That's really what I wanted to do. And so again, with the help of some of the guys that I skate with, I began to stand them up and try and do like a 5-0 or a pivot. That was what was in my mind. And that began to work, and it helped me extend my body up. Now, I've spoken about this before, but when you're riding on a vert ramp, the best way to stay on the board is to stay against the wall. And so what I was doing was I was squatting the actual peak of my kick turn. So as I came up and went round, I was squatting to stay against the wall, which is great because that held me against the wall and made sure I stayed on my board. But as you begin to need to do something like a lip trick, you need to actually start to stand up a bit more and uncompress and unsquat. And a lot of people still squat too much at the top and all their tricks are squatted, and it doesn't look at all stylish because everything is squatted. And, you know, I'm guilty of that as well. And to do these tricks properly, you need to stand up properly and get out of that squat. And so to do the 50-50, I, you know, was squatting into a slash or into a pivot, and I was conscious that I need to stand up a bit more to get the stand up grind and get on top of the coping so that the body weight was on the coping and that I could push it through and turn out. So there's a lot of stuff going on in my mind in order to try and mentally get myself to stand up more. Really what I started to do was turn those pivots and slashes into slapping the board onto the coping and just trying to get there and stand up. So if we look at some of the attempts that I do, literally I'm kick turning, slashing, kick turning and slashing, and just building up that energy and speed by going round and round. And the other reason I'm going round and round is to just get comfortable with my balance as well. It's very easy, certainly for me, to not feel quite straight on my balance and just bail off because I don't feel straight. So that's why I do 2 or 3 walls sometimes just to get my balance right, and then go on like the last wall. I go, right, I'm ready, let's go for it on this wall, and away I go. So as I turn up, you'll see that I begin to pivot and then try and slap my front truck down onto the coping. And, you know, in this case, I jumped straight off as soon as I slapped the front truck down. And that's sort of the point, was to just get the feeling of turning on, slapping my trucks onto the coping and getting stable in the trick before even thinking about coming out. So I do that quite a lot. I'd go round and round and round, couple of slashes, get my speed up, get my balance right, and then on the final approach kind of carve in. So I'm turning a bit wider than I would for a slash grind, kind of carve in and stand up as I carve, wait for the back truck to get onto the coping, slap the front truck down, and there I am. I'm up there, I'm in it, and then I bail off again. And, you know, part of the process was a comfortable bail, getting off safely so that I didn't do the incredibly scary thing of stepping onto your board accidentally as you fall down the ramp, because that can really lead to disaster. You know, anytime that you try and get off your board, you want your board out the way. So jumping off my board or jumping clear of my board for a bail was also really important for learning this trick. So as we go through, I'm going to show you these clips, and this session, this was the day that it felt like it was right. It was going to happen today. I was doing these backside slashes and pivots for months, and just getting the feeling up, slapping my trucks on there and bailing off. I was doing that for probably about 6 months worth of sessions, and I was going every Tuesday for about 6 months. I think it was that long. It might be less, might have been 3 months, but it felt like 6 months. And this session, it felt like it was time to try and stay on there and turn out of one. Now, one issue with this ramp, for me, it felt like I was never getting fast enough. I pumped like crazy around and around, and I was running out of height on the ramp. It felt like I was running out of height. So what I ended up doing was, instead of going up, I was going wide. So I was carving as wide as possible around and around the ramp to get enough speed to turn in or carve in to this 50-50. So that's why I'm going round and round as well. I'm trying to get enough speed, balance, and enough width in my carve to get on to the coping. Now, if I'm just going to do an axle stall on a mini ramp, I just ride in a dead straight line straight towards the coping, do a 90-degree turn and stand up, and I'm on the coping. On the vert ramp, as I said before, we're going from sort of here up to here, which is a whole other motion, trying to get your body to stand up that far. And so the way that I found it easier to do was actually how I discovered to do the 50-50s in the vert of the pool on the pool coping. If you've not seen that video, there's a link here and down below for that one as well, where I'd carve very wide and I'd carve into the grind. As my trucks hit the coping, I would keep the centrifugal force of pulling me outwards to stand me up. So I would go in squatted and turn in and turn with my shoulders, and I would be horizontal as I turned in. But as I latched my trucks onto the coping, I would start to lean back with the centrifugal force of going around, and that would pull me up, and that's how I got the stand up. That's great for getting into them on the vert ramp, but it's a lot harder because of the flat wall. In a bowl, you've got the curve, and so you can really carve around and in the curve, and that helps you go round and pulls you upright, but you don't have that on the flat wall of a vert ramp. So it's a lot harder to do that, but the notion is still there to try and use the centrifugal force to stand you up. So anyway, let's go through the clip. Literally, I'm just going round and round. I got so close a couple of times where I slapped my trucks onto the coping, and it felt like I could have kept going, but my defensive mechanisms was bailing me out and making me bail. It got to that point where I'd be standing up nicely, and it was almost like, just turn back in, just turn back in, you've got the trick. You're in there, and my defensive mechanisms were making me just jump off. And so mentally I had to think past that point. I was standing upright. I had to think past what's past the stand-up point. Past the stand-up point is turning back in. So at the point where I thought I would normally jump, and that was like my safety exit, is to jump off, then I had to mentally picture myself viewing down, looking down into the ramp, and thinking kick turn. So it seems really bizarre, but I had to move my head through the motions, and you'll see a bit of the video here where I'm standing there and I'm going like this, because I'm literally thinking my way through the turn, off the coping and back down into the ramp. It seems utterly bizarre, but I had to just go through those motions in my mind and physically turning my body like this to make myself picture turning back in order to believe it was going to happen. You can even see that everybody that I'm skating with also thinks it's going to happen. It's going to happen any second now. And it's funny, Joe timed his pointing at the camera that time just right, because it happened and I just viewed through it. And see how stoked everybody is that I committed to turning, and that was the hardest bit, was just committing to the turn. But once I'd done that, it brought a whole new sensation, because I often think in my head, you don't know how it's supposed to feel. So how can you land a trick when you don't know how it's supposed to feel? So once I got to that point where I'd sort of turned in, it brought a whole new sensation and a whole new bunch of feelings. And I often say to myself and to others that you can't really land a trick until you have at least offered it up a few times, because you need to know how it's supposed to feel in order to go back in or land the thing. When you have absolutely no idea how it's supposed to feel, you're just kind of throwing yourself out there until you get close. And then one of those close attempts introduces you to how it's supposed to feel. And then you can say, right, okay, now I know how it's supposed to feel. I can then continue and follow through and land it properly. And that first one where I just committed to turning brought these feelings of how it's supposed to feel. And the first one was actually utter terror, because as I turned, my legs decompressed and stretched out. My whole body kind of went like I'm falling. I'd elongated my body to the point where I had nowhere else to go. As you turn out, you are squatted and your legs extend, expecting to come into contact with the surface. But because I was standing almost parallel with the vert wall, my body uncompressing, I got to that point and I'm still going down, which was utterly bizarre. And it was only at the point where my body comes down and starts to come into contact with the transition that when I made contact, then it all kind of caught up with me and I managed to just about wobbly stay on through to a bad landing. I was falling vertically down the wall, parallel with the vert wall, until I hit the transition at the bottom. And I had no idea that that was a thing until I felt it. Then I sort of realized what I needed to do, and I needed to stay against the wall, not go downwards. It's always with vert, it's always that thing of try and stay against the wall. And because I was just turning out on a mini ramp, the transitions like that, and it would just, as you turn out, you just get scooped up. But when you're on this wall, if you just turn out, you're going straight down. So what you've really got to do is carve out. As much as you're carving in to get into it, you've got to carve out as well to stay against that wall. And so that was what I needed to work on next. I needed to keep that commitment, no matter how freakishly scary it was to turn out into midair, like jumping out of a plane, skydiving. I was literally turning out into midair. I needed to do that turn a little more gradual and a little more of a carve and stay against the wall and ride it out. And you can see how extended I am at that point. So as I turn out, my board is still against the wall, but look how I'm kind of edging on my toe side wheel on the back truck. I'm literally slipping down the wall. My legs are fully extended. Look at my front leg. It's got nothing left, and I'm only just hitting the transition when I'm fully extended. My arms are up in the air because my body is fully extended. I've got nowhere else to go. And as I hit the transition towards the bottom of the ramp, it all catches up and I just about kind of catch myself. But if you look at my front foot, it's way too over the wrong side of the board. It's not on my heel side of the board, it's on my toe side of the board. And so my front foot being where it is makes me overbalance and just go down on my back and slide out. But it's a good observation of like where I was. And basically that tells me my front foot was way too light at that point where I'm coming down the ramp. So anyway, onwards, I just ended up doing 100 more kick turn slashes and things, but that feeling was there and everybody was pumping me up and I was stoked. So I just kept on trying and I slapped it up and I was getting close and jumping off again. I was kind of back to my jumping off stage, but with a bit more of a commitment of a turn. You can see I began to start turning but then bailed, and I ended up just going through more and more of this. I had to get that central in my mind and comfortable with it. So anyway, more slashes. We'll just watch through these and you can see in my mind I'm trying to establish the right kind of turnout. Everybody's pumped for it, giving me a lot of stoke and encouragement, and it's just a case of following through. So again and again and again, I'm just trying the same thing. Everybody's watching with bated breath, and it's painful to watch probably because it's just on and on and on. But these people have watched me do this for the last God knows how many months. So I just keep on going and going, and I get to the point where I'm feeling comfortable again. I'm feeling hungry for it, and I just give it another go. And actually this time again, my front foot was too light, and I kind of bailed as I began to turn in because it just didn't feel right. And, you know, that again is a key point of knowing when it's not quite right and bailing safely rather than having a really bad accident. But still, I'm getting close. It's going to happen. Surely it's going to happen. So there's getting to be quite a gap between the one that I almost made it and, you know, trying again and again, and it's getting quite frustrating because I'm getting quite close. I'm sure everybody's getting bored watching it as well, but you just got to keep going again and again and again and again. And, you know, like I said before in some of my videos, it's so close you can taste it. You know it's going to happen, and so I refuse to stop. The only thing that's going to stop me is a really bad slam, and I think I got the exit mechanisms right to not have a really bad slam. So I'm really focused on just landing it. And there it was. After all of that trying, I actually rode away, and you could see everybody else's joy as much as mine. The feeling was immense because I couldn't even picture myself actually having done it, and now that I had, there was that kind of like hunger to get and do it again. You know, that's a weird feeling in itself because you're sort of in this state of disbelief. When you've only done it once or twice, you kind of have that feeling like, am I actually gonna be able to do it again? Was that just a complete luck? I don't have the technique down because I've just scraped away with it a couple of times, but the 2 times that I have landed it have been consecutively better. So all I can do is keep doing the same thing and keep getting those chance moments where I get a good one, and don't stop, you know, keep going again and again, and gradually they'll get better. It was really quick, short and sweet. You know, I got on and got off, but that's because the gravity and centrifugal force and all the forces against me meant that I felt like I had to be quick, had to get on and get off. Otherwise, my balance and gravity would just take over and I'd fall off. Not having done a huge long one across the coping like I would on a mini ramp, nonetheless, getting on and getting off, you know, it's both trucks on the coping. I was standing up a bit in a kind of 50-50, half in, half out, and I turned back in and rode away. So mission accomplished, really. Possibly the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things I've done on a skateboard so far. That, and compared to doing the 50-50 grinds in the vert end of the Crystal Palace pool, by comparison was an enormous grind because I was fully standing up on top and I was just going round, and I think I did about 7 blocks of coping. You know, that was a bigger, better grind, but a lot more scary because it was on concrete. There was no getting off of those. I didn't bail into the transition, I was bailing out the top. So completely different. But if you want to see that video, link to it above and in the comments below. It was all part of the process of getting here to the 50-50 grinds on the vert ramp. So anyway, as before, after I'd done this one, I kept trying, and I'm not sure I got any more that night at all. I think my camera stopped recording at that point. There were more attempts from then onwards. Every week that I went back, I was starting to get the odd 1 or 2, and it began to build into a more regular thing. So the only thing to do next was just to keep on repeating the same things over and over again, getting my speed up with those slash grinds and slapping the trucks onto the coping every now and again and trying to turn enough to ride out. I'm looking at the coping as I approach as if it's a mini ramp, ignoring everything behind me, how big the ramp is and everything, just thinking about how I do a 50-50 on a mini ramp and get the carve in as I approach and make sure the rotation is as fluid as possible. That seems to be the way that now they work, and I can do more often than not if I do that. As I said before, they're very quick, sort of get on, get off, but I get on, slap both trucks down, do a short grind and just follow through and carve out again. So they're very short and quick. And really the only thing that's making that happen is that I am still leaning into the ramp way more than I am on top. I'm kind of still compressed and squatting, and I'm in the ramp more. So sometimes they end up being like a double truck carve if it's on a particularly big ramp, like a 13-foot one, because I'm not getting my body up on top enough because the vert wall's so big. So that's really all I'm working on now, is to try and stand them up a bit more, get to the point where they are proper stand-ups and I can hold on to the grind for longer. I need to stay wider before I go in, so I need to be at the very extent of the ramp before I go in to give myself more distance to grind and get out again. But yeah, that's what I'm really working on now, is to stand them up higher so that I can hold on to the grind for longer and get a bit more on top and a bit more of a stand up before I dip back in again, more in line with what I was doing in the pool at Crystal Palace, where I got up on top and I stayed there and I ground around the top, whatever it was, 6 or 7 blocks, and then chose when to go back in. Whereas at the moment I'm not choosing when to go back in, I'm getting on top and going straight back in because gravity and the forces on me are pushing me that way. So anyway, that's where I've got to so far. That's pretty much learning to 50-50 grind on the vert ramp, and now I'm getting them most often when I want to. When I get to bigger ramps, it's a bit more of an effort, and I get kind of the double trucker stroke really crap 50-50 if I'm honest, but it's happening on bigger ramps, so that's good. Really all I got to do is stand them up a bit more, get more on top, and that's probably 90% confidence rather than anything I'm doing wrong. I just need to trust myself to stand up more as I get up onto the coping. So anyway, I hope you found this info interesting, enjoyed my thought process through the thing. If it helps you in any way, please let me know, or even if it kind of is insightful but you never have any interest or desires to do a 50-50 on a vert ramp. And also let me know if you do 50-50s on a vert ramp, whether it's the same kind of process you went through or whether you just did it like you do on a mini ramp and it just worked for you. I know that I am very guilty of overanalyzing a lot of stuff that I do, but it's just my brain works that way, and I wish I was kind of like hell for leather, don't worry about it, just get on with it. But I do deeply analyze everything I do. Perhaps the opposite to a lot of people. I feel safer the faster I go as well. I know a lot of people sort of approach things with less speed and more caution. I always feel safer to go faster for some reason, and that's why I felt like I had to pump like crazy, going round and round as fast as I possibly could to get up on there. If I don't feel like I've got enough speed to get on there, I can't follow through. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below any of your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you're still watching this far in, do me a favor, hit a like on the video, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe. It's crazy, but like 80% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribers. Most of you are probably here for the first time, first video, but if you watched it all the way through this far, I think you're probably going to want to come back again. So hit the subscribe button and hit the like button, and it will encourage me to make more of these videos. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you again soon. Take care.